Hello and welcome back to the show. On the Original Medicine podcast today, we are going to be talking about Botox and what your injector doesn't know. Okay, so with the rise in popularity of Botox and other injectables like filler, I think it's really important to have this conversation because it's becoming so common. And it's touted as being safe, so much so that there are physicians who use Botox medicinally. They are using it to try to fix a problem, whether that's hyperhidrosis, whether it's for migraines, whether it's for tight muscles. I don't know what else it's used for. Whereas I think injectables are typically cosmetic use, but they're really widespread and it's really common and people are getting them younger and younger. And so I think it's important that while the allopathic community is talking about how safe and harmless they are, that we chime in and talk about here why that is not true. So obviously, everything we talk about on this podcast is from a classical Chinese medicine perspective. And in order to understand what I believe to be true about both Botox and fillers, you need to understand the disease progression process. So first, I want to explain that to you, and then I want to talk about some of the deeper implications. So to begin, Chinese medicine has this really incredible view of the body that is like an elaborate chutes and ladders. So we have this exterior, and we are looking at the body from the exterior all the way into the interior. And a really easy to understand way to think about this is like, let's say you're going out to play in the snow. You're not going to just wear like jeans and a t-shirt. You're going to bundle up. So you're going to have multiple layers, and that most exterior layer is going to be waterproof. And then underneath that, there might be another something that is keeping you warm. And then underneath that is maybe a sweater. And then underneath that, maybe like a t-shirt or a light wool layer, right? But you see my point. We're going from exterior to interior. But all of those layers are geared at protecting the true interior of the person. If you're trying to stay warm out in cold weather, you're using all of these layers which make up the exterior in order to protect the interior, which is you, like your naked body. So for starters, we have this exterior, and it protects not only against the elements and also viruses and bacteria, but also what would be psychological attacks, like environments that criticize us, that make us feel unwelcome. When we live in an environment, in a community, in a family that tells us that basically everything about us is wrong, why can't you be different? Now, this has another layer to that can show up other places in the body, but the original situation is that environment is not safe. Your exterior channels, which are called the sinew channels, think of those layers again, like when you're dressing for cold weather, there are multiple layers protecting the interior, just like there are multiple channels within the exterior layer that are protecting the interior from that stuff coming in. So you've heard Chinese medicine people talk about how cold is a tremendous concern. We don't want to eat cold food. We don't want to be improperly dressed in cold weather. All of this is because cold is seen as a pathogen that comes from the exterior. Like when the weather is cold, we want to wear a scarf. When food is cold, we want to cook it or let it come to room temperature. We don't want to eat stuff straight out the freezer or straight out the refrigerator because one, it constricts the channels and it constricts the energy. And then two, it uses a lot of qi to have to warm up your food. Okay, but that's getting a little bit off topic. The exterior layer is there to protect from the outside. So when something does come into the body, it should come in through that exterior. So for example, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, like we could inhale viruses and then find ourselves sick with a cold if our sinew channels, those channels that make up the exterior layer, aren't healthy enough and supported well enough to push that pathogen out, then we're going to be down with a cold for however long. So what comes next after the sinew channels? After that exterior, we're looking at the low vessels. It's spelled L-U-O, but pronounced low. These are the channels that use blood to hold pathology. So again, the psychological example, someone in your environment is always questioning the things that you do, the things that you're interested in, your goals in life. Oh, you can never be an artist because artists don't make enough money, so therefore you need to go to law school. Oh, you cannot become a lawyer because you're not smart enough. Whatever the case may be, right? Like when we try to change people, we are essentially attacking who they are. The emotion that comes from those thoughts is too much when we have this over and over and over happen in our lives. And so the body shunts that to the low vessels and it holds that there. So that's why we use a lancet to lance that, to poke that channel, to release it through the blood. If you follow me on Instagram, and if you don't, connect with me over there because you can ask questions, we can have a conversation, and you can let me know what you want to hear more about or less about also. If you do follow me on Instagram, you've seen the bleeding treatments that I do. They're extremely, extremely helpful, very profound. I just love them. I think they're so effective for people because this is a human experience. This is not like it happens to one person. It's really common that this is an experience that a lot of people have had. And it could be, that's just one example. It could be a ton of things. But my point is, when something comes in the natural way through the exterior, then it can be dealt with appropriately. So, oops, that problem came in through the exterior. We got to find a place to put it. So it could go into the blood. Now, what happens if it can't go into the blood? And why would it not be able to go into the blood? What if you already have full low vessels? What if you have already had a lot of environmental exposures? Let's say you shop at Bath and Body Works, slathering your body down with all kinds of fragrant stuff. You use all kinds of products like to wash your laundry with, to wash your dishes, to clean your house. It has a lot of fragrance. It has phthalates. It has parabens. All this stuff that is just in the environment. It's pervasive. You have to work really hard to avoid that kind of stuff these days. But all of that can be put into the low vessels. In addition to that, if you didn't grow up in a household with parents who were emotionally well versed, emotionally well trained, which is most of us, probably have a lot of emotional stuff stored in the lows already. So let's say there is no room in the inn, the lows are full. Then what happens? The pathology gets pushed along even deeper into the body. And that, again, is for your benefit. Like it's holding there in the divergent channels. The divergent channels are what I would like for you to imagine like this big container that holds that pathology away so that you can keep going about your daily life. Everything's fine, right? It uses what we call mediumship to do that. Now, mediumship just means resources, yin resources. And as long as we have a lot of mediumship, sufficient mediumship, we can put all kinds of pathology into the divergent channels and it can hold it for a long time. The problem comes in when the mediumship gets a little shaky, it gets a little depleted because we drink coffee every morning, we drink wine every night, we eat dry food, we make a smoothie in the morning, we eat salads. We don't manage our emotions because that's not the type of environment we live in. We're not encouraged to really get in there. We go to therapy, but we are focused on that therapy on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, how can we do these exercises to help us deal with things versus really get to the root of what was causing those things in the first place? Anyhow, hopefully you get the picture of what I'm trying to describe. We have all this emotional stuff that we haven't dealt with. We are living in a toxic environment. There's lots of stuff that we have to be conscientious about in order to avoid. And we can't avoid it all. We can't shrink wrap ourselves. So it's just normal. It's going to happen. But as we're putting more junk into the divergent channels, at the same time, we're not emotionally educated. And we're also continuing to eat in a way that is very dry and cold. That diminishes the amount of mediumship that we have. So then those resources, that mediumship can no longer contain the pathology that was put into the divergent channels. This is where we see diseases of the organs. This is where we see autoimmunity. This is for sure where we see migraines. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. All kinds of things happen when we deplete our mediumship. So, to go back to the original topic of today, why is Botox or fillers a problem? Because now that you see how the disease progression happens from a Chinese medicine view, you see that we always have to deal with things. There's no free pass. You always have to put it somewhere. And so if your lows are already full, it has to go to the divergence. Now, do you trust that your lifestyle is such that your divergence can hold indefinitely? That is possible, but it's not probable based on the way the majority of the world lives these days. We don't eat wet food. We eat a lot of drying foods. We have this emotional situation where we don't really dig into our feelings, and we usually are not raised by parents that have been raised that way as well. So it just keeps going, like the inability to deal with our emotions, and that is very depleting to the mediumship. If you choose to use Botox and filler, what can you expect for your long-term health? And the medical community tells people that there's no risk or virtually low risk, but we know that people get paralysis from Botox. That's kind of a different topic of conversation. Really, today, what I'm focused on is when you put something into the body and you bypass the disease progression process, you create a problem for yourself because it can't just be pushed out. And naturally, you don't want it to be pushed out. If you're going to a dermatologist or an other injector for Botox, you want it because you're electing to get it. So you don't want that to be pushed out, I understand, but you need to take into consideration what other things do you have going on. So let's take the example of Botox being used for like migraines, for example. Injecting Botox to paralyze a muscle does nothing to treat the migraine. Migraines are not caused by tight muscles. Tight muscles are a symptom of the problem, just as migraines are a symptom of the problem. And that problem, and from a Chinese medicine perspective, is depleted mediumship. Now, it could be a problem of the divergence. It could also have low involvement. It could also be something that we haven't talked about yet today called the 8 extraordinary vessels. And these are our very, very deepest layer of channels. And they are the blueprint of our life. They're affected in conception, in utero, with birth, and in our early years of life. So you can see how these apply to many, many people as well. The point is that Botox is never going to solve your migraines. It is at best a Band-Aid. And I would argue that a Band-Aid is a very generous description of Botox, because when I cut myself and I put a Band-Aid on it, that Band-Aid provides protection while the cut is healing. When you inject Botox for a migraine, or frankly for any purpose, that Botox is not doing anything to help the migraine heal or any other situation to heal. It will be exactly the same when you remove the Botox, or rather when the Botox wears off. It will be time for you to get it again, and you will be continually in this cycle. So unlike a Band-Aid, Botox does not allow your body to heal. In addition, it is injecting a literal toxin into the body, and then all of our channels have to move it around and play, again, this game of chutes and ladders. Like, where is there enough space for it to hold it right now? Okay, over here, great. But then that gets tapped out, so then it moves it to another spot. This is what I've talked about in other episodes, where it's really common to get an autoimmune diagnosis, and then not too far along the line, or not too far down the line, you've got another autoimmune diagnosis, because again, you've depleted the mediumship. That's why you got the first diagnosis. But instead of someone knowing how to help you rebuild that mediumship, you've continued on the same path. Like, you maybe have cut out some foods that you've noticed like exacerbate the problem, and that's great for sure. But if you don't really know this way of thinking, then you don't know how to support yourself to prevent you from further depletion, which then results in additional diagnoses of additional autoimmune diseases. So, to summarize all of that, when we get something injected into the body, it violates the way that the body is designed to handle pathology. And pathology might sound like an unfriendly word to you. It might be kind of unfamiliar. Don't get scared. It just means something that's not normal. It's something that is undesirable. We don't want it coming in. Nobody wants to get even a cold, right? Like, how many people do you know who say, "Oh, I hate being sick"? There's a lot that you could unpack there as well, like having to ask for help, having to take time off work, blah, blah, blah. But The reality is it feels terrible to be sick. Nobody enjoys it. And that in itself is pathology. We're trying to prevent pathology from getting to the interior and ultimately to the organs. Okay. So when we are injecting something, and especially when it's something that is absolutely not necessary for any reason, we are jeopardizing our health because the body has to continually move it around and find a place to park it. Okay, so far, I hope you're with me. If this doesn't make sense, please connect with me on Instagram and ask questions. Tell me what's not making sense. I would love to continue the conversation. I do want to talk about one more thing here, which is when we are using Botox and or fillers for cosmetic reasons, this reflects an inability to accept the normal aging process. And a lot of people these days talk about, I want to age gracefully. I just want to look good for my age. Okay, but I think what we have to really ask ourselves when we say those things is, what does it mean to look good for your age? And does that mean injecting something into your body that could jeopardize your health? When we are willing to do something that could jeopardize our health for the sake of cosmetics, we are in an eight extraordinary territory. We are unable to accept that life moves on if we are lucky. We are not appreciating the present moment because we're concerned that our face isn't as high as it should be, or there are more lines than we would like, while we are not acknowledging that that is a privilege denied to many. I don't know the numbers, but there are a lot of people that did not wake up this morning. They did not get to go to their job. They did not get to see their children. They did not get to carry on with their life. And I think that, as trite as that can sound in some ways, we casually forget that today isn't promised, tomorrow isn't promised. So if I wake up with more wrinkles tomorrow than I had today, at least I woke up. And I think the inability to accept that puts us squarely in the eight extraordinary territory. Now, there are also channels in the eight extraordinary realm where we're looking back at things. We're wishing that things could be now the way they were 10 years ago, i.e., our face. When we are injecting our face so that we think we look the way we did when we were 25, this tells us that we are not living in the present moment because we're trying to look as though we did when we were much younger. Whatever the number is, whatever the time is, we're not living in today. And we're afraid of what will come in the future if we don't fill our face or inject it in some way and alter it. Okay, so I think that should just I think basically that's all I wanted to say about that there is a deeper consideration when we are continually doing something that jeopardizes our health for cosmetic reasons. Often we have something deeper. There's also a low channel that comes to mind when I think about this as well, which is the heart low. And the heart low has to do with longing for a time in the past. So perhaps maybe when you were in your 20s, you were having the time of your life. You liked the way you look. You were, getting ahead in your job, or you were pursuing some sort of training or education, right? Whatever it may be, it could have been a very happy time for you. And so you're always looking back at, oh, I wish my life now could be like it was when I was in my 20s, rather than being really present today and appreciating what you have in your life today, and also still appreciating what you had then, but not looking to go back. That's a big distinction, that it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with what your life was like then. You can still appreciate it, but to always want to go back to it, whether that is to have the same life and or to look the same, tells us that there's a pathology present for a person who is always looking for this kind of thing. Okay, I think that pretty much sums up. Let's just review what we talked about. First of all, we're talking specifically, if you're just popping in for some reason, this episode was about Botox and what your injector doesn't know. And of course, they don't know this because Chinese medicine is such a small group of people in the world that practice this. This wouldn't be widely known. So, no shade to them. It's just that I want to talk about this for the public so that they can start thinking in a different way. So I went through the Chinese medicine disease progression process so that you can understand it's a very intricate system system of chutes and ladders, that it's always trying to move pathology a little bit over here and then over here to keep you alive and to keep you well. And we talked also about all the resources that are required to do that. And then also what we might be thinking about when we feel very attached to getting Botox or fillers, what that might mean for us, that we're having a hard time living in the present moment, which is what Chinese medicine is all about. It's about appreciating the present moment and also feeling free to be who you are. And a lot of times, many of us were raised with these ideas about what is appropriate, what looks good, what is valued. I mean, that's just like the sea in which we swim. All of us get this to some degree, and it may be exacerbated in one culture and not in another. It may differ from culture to culture, but there are always expectations. And so I think that this is the strength of Chinese medicine from a psychological perspective, to really help us live presently, and in doing so, free us from those expectations that really aren't serving us. So I really hope you learned something today. And as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, thank you again also. And please feel free to connect with me on Instagram if you have questions or comments. I would love to connect over there.